We just passed the winter solstice, which is the time when some cultures say the sun stands still. That's actually what solstice means. Sol, sun, and stis, I think comes from, I don't know if it's a Latin root or not, but it means stand still. So when was the last time you contemplated your relationship to the sun and moon relative to space and time? Similar to the birds who know either instinctively or mindfully where they are relative to the celestial bodies, mountain ranges, rivers, and oceans, today we'll explore our own sense of place in the cosmos. Hey friends, welcome back to the Mindful Bird Sit. If you're new here, I'm Kristi, and I help people connect deeply with birds and nature while elevating their skills, boosting their confidence, and falling in love with life again. If that's something that you want to do, be sure to subscribe and stick around. All right, let's get started. So, this is another one of those ones where if you're indoors, that's perfectly fine. If you're outdoors, great. I think there's a different kind of connection that can happen when you're outdoors. This morning it was a bit too windy and cold, kind of the combination for me to fight the elements with you all today. So I'm going to be indoors for this one. I did just come back from a run though, where I got my inspiration. So, yeah, so let's begin. And if you are indoors and if you want to crack a window, actually, I haven't done that yet. Let me just go do that. Here we go. Now at least I can hear a little bit of what's going on out there. Yeah, let's start with our feet on the earth this morning. And if you're cross-legged, that's fine, or sitting on the ground, just feel your body connected to the earth, whatever point of contact there is for you. Just start by feeling that connection. And if, like myself, you're maybe a couple floors up from the earth, then just imagine that there is that connection, right? Through the floors, through the wood, through the concrete, all of the layers that you may need to move through. Just allow yourself to do so and to connect with the actual soft body of the earth, which I know in some places right now is hard because it's winter and the ground is frozen. But just let yourself slowly start to connect, feeling what the earth is like this morning. What does it feel like to have your connection with the earth? And what does the earth feel like today? Good work. And now let's start to tap into our breath. So you can take a nice deep breath in, starting from the soles of your feet or the part of your body that is connected to the earth. So let yourself feel that breath coming in. Take a nice deep breath in, filling it as far as you can go, as deep as you can go, and then allowing it to relax and let it go. Lovely. And one more nice deep breath in, filling your lungs, filling your entire body. It's beautiful. And then letting it go. And now we'll just take a moment to feel our own breath. So we were tapping into the rhythm of the earth just a moment ago. And now let yourself feel your own breath. Noticing how deep or maybe how shallow your breath is inside your own body right now. On the inhale, is it expanding completely and filling your lungs, filling your chest cavity? Or is it just a little bit? Maybe is it just entering that area and then exhaling quickly? So just notice that. And we'll just take stock of that over time, noticing if it shifts or changes throughout this sit. And sometimes our posture can help. So just notice what your posture is like right now. You can sit up a little bit taller, stretching the crown of your head up toward the sky, sitting with your shoulders back, allowing yourself to really Take in the fullness of the breath. Receive fully. That's all you have to do right now is just receive. Your exhale is going to come naturally, so you can force it, sure. Just let your breath be natural. Let yourself receive the air around you, and then just let it go naturally. That very feminine thing to do, just receive, being receptive right now, and then giving back. And then we'll begin by staying connected to our own breath while we start to expand our awareness. So you can begin by listening to the sounds that are closest to you in this moment. So it might be your own breath. If you're outside, maybe you can even hear your hair moving in the wind. Just see what the closest sound is that you can hear in this moment. And then slowly start to expand your awareness of sound as if there was a spiral moving around you. So slowly, kind of like you're a seashell, right? One of those beautiful seashells that start to spiral out further and further. And your ears are going to be listening for the sounds. And they're going to start to stretch further and further away from your body, but pausing when there's a sound that comes into your awareness. So wherever it may be, we're just going to slowly start to spiral around ourselves, listening to the sounds that we become attuned to. Remembering to listen behind you. And when you think you've reached the furthest sound that you could possibly hear, see if you can stretch just a little bit further. Is that sound moving or is it stationary? Can you tell what direction it's moving, if it is moving? And are you still able to hear that sound that was closest to you when we first began? While you're also listening to that furthest sound far, far away. Beautiful. So if your eyes were closed, you can gently start to open them. And we're going to tap into our sense of sight right now, but we're still going to be listening all around us. Maybe a new sound will come into our awareness. So as we're listening, we're going to stretch our vision. So find a point off in the distance to focus your eyes on. Some of you may prefer to have an element that you're looking at that's closer, maybe about 10, 20 feet away. Others may choose to stretch your eyes a little bit further and find one that's quite a distance away. It doesn't really matter. They're going to be slightly different experiences, but neither of them is right or wrong. Just choose the one that you're most aligned with right now. So find one point in the distance. Really focus your vision on that. And then, as if there are ripples moving out from that central point, you're going to start to let your eyes stretch, your vision stretch with those ripples. So you're going to stay focused on that point, but you're going to allow your vision to expand in all directions, getting softer and softer and softer the further out you go. And just notice if you've capped your vision any place, maybe above or below. See if you can stretch even further. Maybe you can expand your vision a little bit more in either direction, right or left, up or down. And don't be afraid of the softness or the blurriness that comes. Just see if you can allow that to come. Let your eyes just get nice and soft. One, it's really good for our nervous systems. It tells us that everything is okay as long as it is. Helps us to calm down when we go into this position with our eyes called owl eyes. And then two, we actually are able to perceive more. So in a sense, we're safer by allowing our vision to soften like this because we can see more of those subtle motions. And just notice the kind of motions that you're picking up on now in this moment. And while you're looking, are you still able to hear those sounds that you connected with before? Maybe there's some mid-range sounds between the loudest or that furthest one and the closest one. Take notice of your breath right now in this moment. Has it shifted or changed since you first sat, since we first connected with our breath? Is it maybe a little bit deeper, slower, or maybe it's just the same? And then on your next inhale, take a breath with the intention of smelling the air. So you're going to smell the air this morning, noticing what's unique about this morning's scents. And if you have a hard time smelling, you can do that thing that sometimes the animals do where they take a couple quick breaths, or even we do that sometimes if we're really trying to smell something and we're not thinking about it. We'll go, we'll take a couple breaths in to try to smell it a little bit better. So you can do that as well. And then finally, let's tap into the sensations on our skin. So you can do this with your eyes open or closed, whatever you prefer. And just notice what you're feeling on your skin. And if you're inside, that's fine. You can, there's even some subtle motion of air moving and circulating indoors. So you might be able to feel air, you might be able to feel sun. Maybe it's something else. Maybe you can feel your clothing touching your skin, but just notice the sensations on your skin right now. Beautiful. And for just one moment, I'm going to invite you to try your best to feel all of those, to be present to all of those, the sights, the sounds, the smells, the sensations on our skin, inside our body and outside of our body. See if you can do all of that in one moment. It can be a lot to hold at any one given time. So just be gentle with yourself, go slow. And for those of you who weren't here when we first began, we're going to be focusing on our sense of place today. And so to start, you can certainly have your eyes open or closed, whatever works best for you right now. So if your eyes are open, well, actually, it doesn't matter either way. Have them open, have them closed. It's going to work perfect, just the same. But what I want you to do right now is we're going to start big picture in terms of connecting with our place and knowing our place in the big movement that happens in the earth. So let's begin by first connecting with the moon. So do you know where the moon is right now? Maybe you can look for it or just imagine, like first test yourself. Be like, where is the moon? Do I know where the moon is right now? And then you can try to get a sense of it and then look, see if you're right. See if you are right where your sense of where the moon is. Great. And now just take a moment to connect with the moon. So in lots of ways throughout history, women have been connected to the moon. They say that our bodies are connected to the moon because she holds the rhythms of the ocean. She taps into the rhythms of the women and their cycles. So just let yourself connect with the moon as we did with the earth before. So right now, just spend a moment or two. We'll be in silence for a moment or two. And you can do so with your eyes closed or open, but just imagine your connection with the moon in this moment. You can notice your place on the earth in relation to where she is, where the moon is right now. Also tapping into the phase of the moon. And then just connecting with that idea of what phase you're in this moment, in this month. And sometimes her energy is really strong. It even wakes us up at night, sometimes brightly shining in our windows, and other times almost imperceptible. And it's easy sometimes to forget about the moon as we move around and she moves around us. Beautiful. And even if you can't see the moon right now, maybe it's cloudy where you are, just try to get a sense of where the moon might be right now, what phase she'd be in. And now you can send a blessing out to the moon for her role in our life, often imperceptible, but always doing her task, always doing what she needs to do. And now we're going to shift our awareness and our attention to the sun. So again, you can close your eyes. Maybe you can feel where the sun is. Maybe you already knew. And for some of you, it might be behind the clouds. So where is the sun in this moment? Do you know where the sun first rose on this morning? and where he's going to set. Is there a landmark that you know, that you can connect with, that marks where he's going to set on this day compared to where he rose? And take a moment now just to connect with whatever it is that the sun is for you. And just in this moment, what is the sun? Connect with that entity of the sun in your life right now. So, in some cultures, the solstice actually it means the sun stands still. So, especially those cultures that are closer to the equator, it feels as though the sun actually stands still for 3 days, which is interesting when you think about history and some stories that a lot of us know about something that happens for 3 days and whatnot this time of year. So, thinking about the sun standing still for 3 days and just imagining your connection with the sun. And do you feel that stillness right now? I'm sure with the holidays, it might feel a little busy and chaotic, but can you connect with that idea and that experience of the sun right now? Even though that's not technically true, the sun doesn't actually stand still. But just what is that like? What would that be like just to be still right now? Having that big driving energy, resting and standing still for a few days. I'm going to take a moment. You can, if you want to, offer a blessing to the sun, gratitude for the role the sun holds in your life in this moment and maybe all throughout your life. Beautiful. So now let's think about our place. And this is, I know, this is one of those experiences where sometimes the work that we do here during our bird sit, it's really obvious the connection with the birds. And other times it's maybe not quite so obvious, but just thinking about the birds and their connection with these bodies, right? With the body of the sun and the moon and the other elements we're going to talk about in just a moment, and their knowledge of place. And so now what I want you to do is imagine sort of the next largest entity out there. So think about, even if you're in the desert, even if you live in Arizona right now, where is the nearest large body of water? So meaning the ocean, an ocean or a sea. So where related to you right now is the ocean or the sea? Think about how far away the big mama waters are from you right now. And what direction or directions, for some of you, it might be multiple places, does the ocean reside? And even though some of you might be very far away from this big mama waters, do you know what her tides are doing right now. Is it low tide or high tide or somewhere in between? Imagining all the currents that move in the oceans and thinking about all of us all around the country right now in all the different oceans and the connectedness that those oceans have with one another. You can take a moment and offer your gratitude or a blessing to the big mama waters, the ones that are closest to you. And then next, we're going to be presencing the next largest entity or body in nature. So think about the nearest mountain to you. Some of us just came back from time in New Mexico, and we were talking about just one particular tribe there. There's many, many tribes of people who still connect with the land in various ways, but the Sandia Mountains that some of us got to stand on top of are a very prominent entity out there. And so is a mountain. I don't know the native name for this mountain, but the English name is Mount Taylor. So different people have these placeholders for themselves and their people, right? And so with the Navajo, they have these four sacred mountains that hold space for them and their people. So, what are the mountain ranges that are nearest you? And again, some of you might have to stretch kind of far to think about the nearest mountain range, but take just a moment to think about them and your connection to them right now. And then we'll take a moment while we're on the mountains to imagine some of those mountains are the birthplace of the streams and the giant rivers. So, what streams and rivers live around you? What's the closest large river and the closest little stream that your life is connected to? If you were to follow it up to its source, could you find that? Do you know where the source of that river or stream is? And do you know where it touches the sea or the ocean? Who it might intersect and blend with as it travels toward the ocean? And then coming in even a little bit closer, a lot of us have special trees or boulders, some big old grandma or grandpa trees that are maybe on our own property or maybe not too far from us, but that hold a space for us, that hold that when we pass them, we acknowledge them in some way, that they might yeah, just hold place. Maybe when you're giving directions, you might say, turn at the large, the big old snag where the eagle always stands. So just think about if you have a big tree or boulder that you know in your neighborhood. And then now finally coming to yourself, standing on the earth today, holding space, holding a place, an important place on the earth. Knowing your connection to all of those ones around you, to each other here, and to the big wide world and universe all around us. You can take a moment to offer blessings or gratitude to all those ones that you connected with today as we traveled to many places. And when you feel complete, you can open your eyes if they're not already open. And I want to thank you for joining me today. So if you have to go, then thank you so much for coming. But if you'd like to stay for our chat at the end, you're welcome to stay. So thank you everybody for coming and being with us today. And just think about the birds, think about their place. So as they're moving around today, I know I saw a really lovely winter flock of, it was the two of the woodpeckers, it was the downy and one of the sapsuckers with the ruby-crowned kinglet and the chickadees and the yellow-rumped warblers. And it's just like their people are moving along the land today, and knowing their place and maybe behaving differently now that the solstice is upon us. And maybe not, but just connecting with that, like wondering about that, being curious about that. What is different for them right now? What is new? And now that the earth is shifting just a little bit. So anyway, I'd love to hear from you all. What was your experience this morning? Anyone want to share a story from this morning's practice? And if you do, just go ahead and raise your hand. Julia, yeah, please go for it, Julia.
I always seem to be the first one, but that's okay. I was reminded during this when you were talking about the moon. Uh, Many of you may know Barbara Kingsolver as an author. And some years ago, she had a collection of short stories called High Tide in Tucson. And one of the stories in there by that name was about uh, they were living in Tucson, area at the time, and they took a vacation to Florida and were along the beach. And so, of course, they don't connect live things and bring them back, but they collected shells, the kids did. And so, okay. Well, turns out there was a hermit crab hiding in one of these shells. So they built a container for it. But it puzzled them. It seemed like it had died. It was not active when they thought it should be. And they finally figured out that this hermit crab was behaving as if it were still on the beach, but in time with the tide as it would be in Tucson. And that makes sense. And well, and I'm thinking, how much of our body is water actually. Surely we must be affected, maybe not consciously, but I thought, So I would love to get a tide table for Tulsa, which I'm sure there is not one, but I don't even know how I would find one, but I find that really curious to try to engage with and be aware of.
Yeah, and thinking also about like the places where we were born, So um also just thinking about just I don't know if I told some of you who were with me in New Mexico just recently, but there I know I told Dan this story, I think, but there so my teacher I had a teacher from New Mexico, a native man that I worked with for many, many years, and he told us this story of a local guy. And he said that whenever some guys were going to go out hunting and they wanted to know what the weather was going to be like, they would call this old timer, let's just call him Joe. And they call Joe and they say, "Hey, Joe, what's the weather going to be like up on Sandia Peak? Or what's the weather going to be like over in Taos? You know, what's the weather going to be like over in this particular little valley?" And Joe would be like, "Oh, just give me a minute." And what he was doing is he had collected from different hunters, he'd collected bear fat from these bear that had lived in these different places and these different mountains and valleys and like wherever he could. Anytime someone killed a bear, if they were willing to, they would give Joe the bear fat and he kept it in these jars. And Joe could tell what the weather on that mountain or at that particular place was going to be like because what the bear fat was doing in the jar. Like the bear fat would respond in a particular way based on what the weather was like in that area. And weather was like more spot on than anybody's predictions. And so all the people used to call Joe to find out what the weather was going to be like. And so speaking of like our bodies and like the fat in our bodies knowing, like having a memory and having a knowing of our place, especially our place of birth, or the place that we've lived the longest, I suppose. I think it's a time, like an opportunity to ponder that, you know? Yeah. Yeah. Julie, I love your story. Thank you for that. There's also just in terms of birds, there's another interesting story that I I had a chance years ago to it was one of my friends. It was Dave Moskowitz and Casey McFarland. Those guys were putting together the Peterson's Field Guide to bird nests. And so I was doing some research for them, and I was talking. When I lived in Connecticut, there was what was it called? Gosh, Ripley. It was the Ripley Waterfowl Conservancy, and I don't remember if it was the guy from Ripley, believe it or not, but like anyway, he was a very famous man. I think he was part of the Smithsonian. That's what he was. He was one of the famous curators for the Smithsonian, and he had this waterfowl conservancy. And anyway, so I was talking to them about eggs and things like that. And one of the things he told me was that they had this duck from Russia, and it was maybe like from South America, wherever it was like on a completely, probably it must have been like from like South America, because it was a completely different time. And the duck was laying its eggs like in the winter time, so they had to be really careful with it because, obviously it was cold, the eggs could freeze, and so they had to make sure that they were incubating it. But because that duck was behaving based on not on where it currently was, but where it had been raised. And this was just a duck that had come from like an egg. I think they got it from like an egg. It wasn't an adult bird that got brought to them. It was like an egg that they raised. So even that baby, like that baby chicken, or not chicken, but duck, never having actually lived, it was, I think, born or, hatched. I don't know if it hatched. It hatched in Connecticut, but I think it was like, yeah, it must have been, what do you call it? It's not like born.
Conceive,
No,
conceive,
but at least conceive. But when it comes out of the mother chicken or the duck, what do they call that? Like, it's not giving
laid.
birth. Laid. Thank you. When the egg was laid, it's really that simple, right? When the egg was laid, I think it was laid in South America and then it got shipped to Connecticut, that kind of a thing. So that was just fascinating to me that this duck was behaving based on where it was from, not on where it currently lived. So yeah, it's just we could go on for days and days about this, but I think it's a really wonderful idea. Yeah, thanks, Julia, for your story. Who else would like to share their experience from this morning? It could be totally unrelated to that or whatever you want to. Yeah, Jackie, please.
Well, all of this talk of connection and unseen impacts, it's just fascinating. And to think about there's so many unseen factors that influence us that we don't even realize. And I don't know, that's a really interesting thing to think about. And I think in terms of self-acceptance, even, that we think we know what we're doing because we do something and our ego says, look what I did, and it's like, no, the thing was happening before you claimed that you were the one who did it, and so I don't know, it's very soothing to think about this. And it made me wonder, in terms of the moon cycles, I mean, obviously, I would assume none of us have period. Well, maybe I shouldn't be so personal. Younger women here could, but most of us don't have periods anymore. And but I still wonder if there's a part of us that responds to that cycle, and that maybe there's some changes in our emotions or behaviors or something related to that. And it's just a curious thing to think about. So thank you for expanding my frame of reference here.
Yeah, for sure, Jackie. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah, you bet. Yeah, I like that idea of just thinking about the different entities or energies that are impacting us that we may not know. And I think that's one of the reasons we do this practice is to become aware of more and more and more of the subtleties that are out there that we can connect with. And so you all are doing it all the time. And I think we all have the capacity, it's like the cat that the owners move like 300 miles away and the cat ends up finding its way back to its original home. um, and people are amazed at that. And I think that all of us have that capacity. We've just maybe become a little domesticated and maybe forgotten to give attention to the things that the more wild amongst us give attention to. And so one reason that we do this sit is to give attention to some of the more natural, wild aspects of the world around us, and so that maybe we can start to wake up those parts of ourselves that have been resting for a little while, maybe for some generations even. Yeah. Yeah. Um, Della just reminded me that I think last week I told you all that this was going to be the 100th bird sit. And so I looked on when I posted the last one on YouTube. It was technically, I think, 98 last week. So this week is 99. So next week is going to be the 100th bird sit. So yeah, thank you, Della, for saying that. So we'll just like hoot and holler next week for 100 bird sits. Yeah, I know. Thanks, Marcia. That's great. Yeah. Yeah. Sweet. Well, who else has a story that they want to share from this morning or any insights that came to them? Yeah, Marcia, please.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of food for thought for many stories, many writings out of what you just helped all of us with, and the everything. Just so many senses and thoughts that have come through in stories. I think probably for all of us. So, I mean, I could probably talk a couple hours on today's bird sit. So, but I will say that when you asked us to go out to get sound, I can't remember exactly what you said, but I found myself on not myself, but on a trail, and the sound of footsteps on the dirt, gravel, the Pacific Crest Trail, and um, they say sound never stops, right? So can we, if we're that sensitive, hear that sound and it continues? And those steps, and in water, they say it really just keeps going and going. So all that vibration and energy. But there was a mourning dove, or I don't know what kind of dove exactly I heard when you first said listen. And then I had snow geese that I hadn't seen for a few days, maybe 6 or 7 or 8 went by. And their wings are still tipped black this year, and maybe last year a little bit, which is interesting. And but the snow geese come here from Wrangell Island and Yellowknife, where I live in the California desert. And I love seeing them, but there are people in Canada who say they're a nuisance, and they're a nuisance on the local baseball field. But I love to see them. And I followed them up to Yellowknife when I found out I went to see where they come from. And but I haven't been to Wrangell Island. That takes a little more doing to get to. So anyway, but amazing. And you mentioned authors, and I mean, there's water in the universe and big bodies of water that who knows what we don't know, or what's frozen that could become a waterfall, or so it just was so full. And it's been a while since I've joined because of work. So I'm off for 2 weeks, and it was just wonderful. So thank you.
Yeah, it was my pleasure, absolutely. And what was the thing that you said something about, I lost my train of thought there for a second. That I wanted to tap into. Oh, with the geese and how you followed them. And I think that's really inspirational, and one, just thinking about the idea of like the streams and rivers that live close to us and where they originate, but thinking of doing that with a bird, like a particular bird that you might have a connection with, and thinking of like where does it nest, or where does it migrate to, and going there, like what a cool thing to do, and just sort of getting to know them in all their life experience, and or maybe even going to South America, and traveling to the furthest reaches of where they spend their winter time. And for some of them, not all of them, of course, but I love that idea, Marcia. That's really a beautiful one. So thank you. Yeah, thanks for that inspiration.
Yeah. And I actually went in the winter, so I got to go on the ice road when they weren't there, or in spring. And it happened to have been one of those four lunar eclipses that was going on, and Northern Lights. I mean,
Oh,
I just totally, and it was because I was looking at them and seeing people who do the bird count one
yeah.
year. And asked them, where do the geese come from? And it was just that immediate that I said, I have to go, or I'm going to go
Yeah.
sometime. Yeah. And it
Well,
was
big
really
high
cool.
five to you. Well done on doing that. Yeah, following that inspiration. I love it. And I love that you brought up the bird count. So right now, a lot of them have already happened, but some of them are still going to happen, the Christmas bird counts. And all y'all, don't be shy to go join one. Just reach out to the local Audubon or your local bird group, and they often will pair you with a more experienced birder, or some of you are the experienced birders. So don't be afraid, because a lot of them also just need help. They have so many areas to cover that they don't have enough people to cover them, and they would really appreciate some more eyes on the ground. So definitely reach out to, and it's just a great time to connect with local birders and people in your area, and maybe get to know a different part of your region. And then the tally at the end of the night is always really fun. They usually have pizza parties or things like that, and everyone gets to hear like who found what, and it can just be a fun community kind of experience. So if you I'm actually just thought of it the other day, and I was like, oh yeah, and ours are happening. I noticed in the South they happen like really late, so I think some of them are happening in January. But in Connecticut, I think it was always like this. It was like the weekend before Christmas. They do it. So some may already be done, but some may still be happening. Especially the smaller ones. There can be like some of the like less common, or the less like big town birds, not bird sits, but bird counts that need more people. And anyway, it just can be a great connection point. Yeah. Did anyone have one more story before we get going? I want to make sure that any voice that wants to be heard is heard. Y'all good? All right. Well, have a beautiful holiday, everybody, this week, and we will be here next week for our 100th bird sit. So I look forward to seeing you all there. And thank you, everybody, for coming today and just lighting up my day. Hi, Cindy. Good to see you. Good to see you. All right, everybody. Much love. Have a good holiday.
Wonderful Christmas.
Yeah, you too. Bye, Dawn. Hi, Dawn. Bye, Dawn.